Welcome to the Ad Astra podcast. Today we have with us again David Juste. Welcome. David Juste is a researcher at the Ptolemaios and Arabos Latinos project, who has produced a lot of research on the works of Ptolemy throughout the Middle Ages, and it's an incredible project, a long-term incredible project, and I hope it will produce much more interesting material. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much.
So we're here today to talk a little bit about your research, which has been on horoscopes, astrological judgments, and you have mainly done survey of what materials we have. And you have just now done a large research on the existing, and correct me if I'm wrong, the existing judgments in Latin language.
Until 1450, the ones that exist, yes.
That's correct. You want me to talk about the article?
Yes.
Yes, so this is actually a piece that I just completed recently. That's going to be probably a large article of 50 or 60 pages to be published in a special issue of Micrologus. It's actually the issue 100 of Micrologus, and that's so they decided to do a special one. And this article will be published in that issue. I think the editors are Paravicini, Baliani, and Daniel Jacquard. So this article, well, actually, this is an article that I had in mind for quite a while, but I never had the courage to put all the material together because, as you know, I am doing this catalogue of astrological Latin manuscripts, and as I go through all the libraries in Europe and elsewhere, I see all sorts of material that I know would be interested, should be known, and we need to publish them. Of course, I am way too slow to follow all my discoveries, but I had in mind for a long time that I should gather together all the judgments on nativities that we have, at least for the Middle Ages. And this is what I did in that article. There are 34 judgments for people born before 1450. Mm-hmm. So this is what I call the Middle Ages, but of course this limit is purely arbitrary. Of course it has no, well, not only arbitrary, because if I had to go just 20 years later, there would be so many more that then it would become a book, and that couldn't be an article anymore. Because
a future project.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. Well, look. Now, I was actually surprised when I compiled all the material to see that there were 34 between 1450, because at first I thought that will be like 20 max. I can do that. It will be a small article, and that's fine. I just give the incipit and explicit. It will just be a note, and in the end, it's going to be a big article. But for the period after 1450 and up to perhaps the end of the 17th century, I think I know about, I should have checked my files, but I think maybe I have about 200 more. So it's not actually that enormous. But of course, the reason we know that there were many, many more judgments in the Middle Ages, in the 16th century, in the 17th century. But that's the kind of document that does not keep well. I mean, you have no reason to keep those documents after the validity period. After the person dies. Exactly. Or maybe it can become part of the family archive. If it is the Duke of Milan, if it is a very important person, why? Because the manuscript is beautiful, it is illuminated, it's a beautiful product, so maybe you keep it in the archive, and in the end it ends up in the Ambrosiana in Milan, or in a public repository. But in principle, there is no reason to keep that kind of documents. Although Well, that's not exactly true because, as I explain in the article, in quite a few instances, judgments were preserved because later astrologers needed models, or at least something they could refer to in case, So that's the reason why some of the judgments survive. So when I speak of judgment on an activity, it is of course a birth horoscope, right? But I believe that everyone who listens to this podcast will know about that, right?
We hope so. But anyway, it's we are talking about horoscopes of people, and judgments is the interpretation of the horoscope of people.
That's right.
Just to make sure we are all in the same page.
Yeah, and actually you do well. I mean, you're doing well because it's very important to distinguish, and I've seen that quite a bit among the historians of science do not distinguish clearly between a horoscope and a judgment. But the horoscope is only the diagram. It's like the chart. It's the tema Kaylee, or So it's only the diagram. It can be a round or a square, but it's only one picture. It's an image. While a judgment can be only 2 pages long, but it can only be 300 pages long. It depends. So because horoscopes, we have thousands and thousands preserved in Latin, but only maybe maximum 200 plus judgments.
Yes. This takes us to another question. How did you get to this 34? They are in Latin. They are up until 1450, and they have to be long, so to say, because you did a few short ones. Yeah,
you're right. Actually, that should be very clear. First of all, I don't take the vernacular. So I know that there are judgments in Italian, in French, in English. I don't take them. Well, first because I am not inclined to study the vernacular in general. I don't feel comfortable with it, especially my language, French. I don't want to deal with 14th century French. Really, I don't want to do that. But also, the problem is if I see that kind of document in Polish or Hungarian or Czech, I mean, I just can't understand a word, and I have no reason to reject Eastern European languages and keep German, Italian, French. Well, French, I don't know. If I could anyway. That's one thing. I keep only Latin, and I decided to exclude very short judgments, but they are not really judgments. But very often you have an astrologer's handbook. In the Middle Ages or even in the 16th century, and you have all sorts of horoscopes with notes in the margins or even below the horoscope, and sometimes it really looks like a judgment. The notes say that this person will be like this, like that there is a danger when he will be around 35 years old, and blah blah blah. That I don't take because, let's say, when it's less than a page, I don't take it into account, because then it's too complicated. There are too many documents, and then you would lose the real what really matters. Yeah.
Okay.
So just to make clear the criteria, the criterion you used.
Yeah, sure.
And then I was looking through the collection, because this is a collection of horoscopes, and the first one, the number one, is from the beginning of the middle of the 12th century.
That's correct.
1135. So, and it's from Ezra, Abraham ibn Ezra.
Yes.
We have 2 actually from Ezra.
Yeah, well, as I say, because I have the second one, which was very short, but still enough to be taken into account, the 34. Yeah, it is not certain that the other one is from Abraham ibn Ezra. The only thing we have is the name and the place Béziers. And we know that Abraham ibn Ezra was in Béziers in 1148, so it is possible that he did the horoscope of a boy born in 1135. But it's not certain that it's him. There were many Jews in Béziers and in the south of France, and surely others would have been called Abraham. But well, actually, I had written about that judgment just a footnote before, in which I said that it is so crude that I find it hard to believe that it will be by him. And then I realized as I prepared this material that I don't agree with that argument anymore at all. I mean, this is ridiculous. Of course, the same person.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It is a bit short. It's a bit short, the judgment.
Yeah. It is very short and totally unsystematic. It's like there is no order of material. It's like it seems as if someone had recorded what he said aloud, maybe to the parents of the boy at the time. And because, I mean, the order of the material makes no sense really. I mean, it's not that it's not extremely chaotic, but it makes no... While the other judgment, which is certainly by him, is totally different. Yeah. But that is not a final... Well, I think I put a question mark about next to the name. I don't know whether it's him or not. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you did.
And unless we have a clear attribution, it's always a suspicion. It's just an attribution. We are not really sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but and did you find any... I'm just curious, among your research, is there a country or an archive where you find more examples of this work than others? Because I'm always, I told this a number of times here in the podcast. For example, Portugal doesn't have many.
Yes.
It still needs to be researched, and we hope to research it soon. But there aren't many examples of judgments
yes.
that early in the timeline. So, what's the panorama that you found out?
Well, actually, oh my God, this is a big question, and this is also a very interesting question. I mean, well, I'm a person who likes that kind of statistics by country and things like that. It's a bit stupid, but I like it.
Well,
the thing is, to start with, I'm not sure that Portugal is really an exception, because when you look at the whole picture, Spain is also almost non-existent. Mm-hmm. Not only in terms of judgments. I don't know any judgment that is preserved in Spain today. I mean, basically in Madrid or Escorial or Barcelona, because there are very few, or maybe Salamanca or Seville. There are none or very few. But even astrology more generally is basically absent from Spain. And when you think, I mean, today, I'm not talking about the 13th or the 14th century, but today there are very few astrological manuscripts in Madrid, very few in Barcelona, very few in Seville or Salamanca. I don't know why. And especially when you think that it is in Spain that most scientific translations took place in the 12th century. But it seems that all those translations, as soon as they were made, they were sent over somewhere in the north. And they are no longer in Spain. I mean, this is something that is really bizarre, because even when you think that Salamanca, at least from the second half of the 15th century, the university had a chair dedicated to astrology, which is actually not that common. I mean, that was common in northern Italy and in Krakow. But apart from that, it's only Salamanca. Yeah. But we have few astrological manuscripts in Salamanca. There are a few. But compared to other university libraries, there are more in Erfurt. There are even more in Leipzig. How is that possible? I don't know. I have no answer to that question.
Well, maybe with the Jewish diaspora, they would take them because
that's a possibility, yes.
Because, for example, in the case of Portugal, which is not exactly like Spain, but it has similarities, we don't find any reference to Latin. We don't have many references, but we don't find any reference to Latin astrologers at the court until
Latin
16th century. Until the 16th century.
Right.
So what you have is Jewish physicians who are also astrologers working at the court. So I would suspect that a lot of the material would be with them and
within their families
and in Hebrew, and a lot of that material exited the country when the Jews were expelled, and later on, and most of it is now in foreign libraries. I know this because participated in a project which studied that kind of document, specifically the one that had decoration.
Jewish manuscripts.
Jewish
Right.
translated manuscripts, and there is none in Portugal at the time, and they were all produced here. So they are everywhere. So I think that might be the case specifically for Portugal. I'm not sure about Spain because it's a slightly different context, but I suspect that. And after that, so when we reach 1500s, most of them are already working in Portuguese and not in Latin. So you don't have Latin papers that I know of.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's also another characteristic that's very strange. As far as I know, we have, aljameado, which is writing of Portuguese or Spanish or some other language in Hebrew or Arabic characters. We have texts
Yes.
Portuguese written with Hebrew characters, and in Spain we have texts in Castilian written with Arabic characters.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a separation. We don't have aljameado in Arabic characters for Portuguese or vice versa. This is something that intrigues me. As far as I know, maybe there are exceptions, but this is another strange thing here in the peninsula. Well,
Yeah, the oldest astrological document we have, which is a small treatise, very small treatise, a few pages on longevity. It's written
in aljameado.
part in Hebrew, part in aljameado, with also Portuguese with Hebrew characters. We are trying to make an edition of that at some point. We hope to do it soon.
It's not as easy
But this
as
is
it sounds.
but this is late. Yeah, this is late 14th century, I think. So 1390s somewhere. So quite late. We don't have anything earlier than that survived.
There's quite a few mysteries here in the peninsula about the conservation and the preservation of manuscripts.
Yeah.
Very strange. Yeah.
There is something that is not entirely clear. No, I think in the article, because that doesn't say for the rest, I just wrote this concerning the geographical origin of judgments. So basically it's Germany for about 8 or 9, Italy for 7 or 8, France for 7, and then Poland for 6, and England 3. And there are 2 that are of unknown origin. I mean, I didn't find out. And Poland, if Poland has 6, it's basically due to the University of Krakow. That was at the second half of the 15th century and the first decades of the 16th century, the European capital for astrology. There's no doubt about that. It was like really an army of astrologers working together in Krakow. I'm very sorry. This should be really studied by someone, probably someone Polish, but there is a wonderful work to be done on the University of Krakow still.
Yeah. I think in terms of documents, there's a whole many years of research.
Oh yes! Oh my God!
It's good for people like us who like to study documents. So it's a good things that we can do. I would like to ask you also about the organization of the judgments, because you offer here like what you think it is the typical, or at least the most frequent kind of organization. 3 topics. First, the judgment with or without the calculations for the horoscope, and then the judgment itself with something like rectification using Animodar or Trutina Hermetis, and all this first part. And then when they think that they are satisfied that the horoscope is correct, they judge the houses normally, not entirely, and then predictions, third. So,
Yes.
and as we were talking before, you said that this is more like a concept because there are exceptions. So I would like to, for you to explain a little bit how this is done, how this is normally done.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the 3 parts you gave that are the normal. That's the normal pattern. for any horoscope. So first, you do the calculations. What is important is the rectification, which can also be verification afterwards. Because if you, I mean, of course, most people didn't know the time of birth in the Middle Ages. I mean, at least until the generalization of the mechanical clock, that is certainly not before the end of the 15th century or even the 16th century, most people had no idea when they were born. So they had a sort of approximation, and they went to the astrologer with, well, I believe I was born before lunch on that day. But before lunch is a bit like, what does that mean? Is it between 8 and 12? So you have like 4 hours. And then there are rules to make the rectification by Animodar, Trutina Hermetis, or other things in the 16th century. There is more. And most judgments contain something about this, or at least they say following which rule they have rectified or verified the horoscope. Sometimes you have all the calculations from astronomical tables, you have the mean motion of each planet, and everything is given. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, like the case of Henry Bate of Mechelen, he explains in detail that he asked his mother, that he really chased his mother down to know exactly when he was born, what time, because before lunch that's not enough, I need to know the time. And he went to the council of his city to find documents. He asked his uncles, aunts. He inquired with the whole family to find the exact, well, he didn't find the exact time. He had an approximation from which he could work out but in this case, he didn't believe in the Animodar. He did the Trutina of Hermes. Well, in the 34 documents, there is also the funny case. Oh, sorry, I'm digressing here, but there is the funny case of this Italian ruler of Cremona in around 1260. I forgot his name, Alberto.
I saw it. I saw it here.
Yes. And in that case, apparently, even the year of birth was not known. So but that's not enough. There is no possible rectification. Because rectification, you need to know. I don't know exactly, but it should be within 2 weeks, right? If it is more than that, you cannot possibly rectify a chart.
Yeah, I've seen instructions later, not medieval, but instruction for rectification, and they say that if it's more than half an hour, you can only give a general judgment. You cannot do anything.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because there's no point, for instance, when you go, when it comes to predictions, to apply directions in a horoscope that has no time.
I think it's...
yes, of course. Of course, that's the main problem, directions. Yes, because in direction, what is it?
When the mentioned is 4 minutes, I think.
So it's kind of a lot.
Yeah, so it's like you forget about, of course, about that. So in the case of that Italian ruler, Roberto Pallavicino, voilà. Yeah. Nothing was known. So what the astrologer did, he took the horoscope, the nativity of 3 of his children, and by investigating the 3 horoscopes, he could ask questions about the father, and about the facts and life of the father, and that's how he did it. That's not bad. That's not bad. And he uses not only the 4th house, the house of the parents, but then you have the position of the son, the son, because the son is the father, and then you have the pars, the source, the pars of the father. So there are things you can do. It's possible, and maybe when you cross the information you find in 3 different horoscopes, maybe you can reach some conclusions. But, yeah.
And he probably, and then you think the age of the person has to be coherent to be a transparent already. So and it kind of reverse engineering the horoscope. Very interesting.
But that's right. That's exactly it. Yeah, I was amazed to see that, because also, I mean, this nativity is found in the middle of an extraordinary collection of over 100 interrogations, most of which were questions put by that ruler, Roberto Pallavicino, to the astrologer. So clearly the guy, because he didn't know his birth date or probably even the year, because I've seen that even modern data, they don't have they are not sure about the year of birth. So it's really a problem. He had several astrologers at his service, but he did mainly interrogations. Yeah. And he was not living always in the same city as the astrologer, so he sent letters. And I guess the astrologer took the time the letter arrived on his desk. I don't know how he proceeded, but clearly there are some interrogations where the querent was not present. It was through letters. That's that was all new to me. I didn't know it existed.
I can imagine the astrologer every time you received a letter thinking, "Oh, Alberto again."
Yeah.
Or maybe he was happy, like, okay, I'm on business, I'm working. I don't know. But it is interesting. Yeah. Alberto was very.
And if you make too many mistakes, you end up like,
Well, that's what I call the quality control.
Yeah, that's right. But we were talking about the structure of horoscope. Sorry, I completely digressed. Yes, so you have the often a part dealing with the calculations, rectification and calculation, or one or the other. And also that's important. That includes the calculation of the main significators of the chart. That is the Hileg, the Alcocoden, the Almuten, whatever, however this is called, because but often the Almuten. And then you also have, in principle, the nativity horoscope is given. But often you find 2 or 3 horoscopes, because you also get the horoscope of the new moon or the full moon that preceded birth. Yes. And that can be useful for all sorts of things. I mean, of course, the position of the new or the full moon is one of the elegiacal places. Well, that's another funny word. We need to fix the vocabulary here, because and you can have the horoscope of conception sometimes too, which is clearly related to the Trutina of Hermes, but probably to other things too. But that I'm not sure what the exact use of that, because you just need to know the position of the moon. The rest you don't need. So I don't see why they cast the whole horoscope for conception. But
because there's a theory that the ascendant of the conception will also correspond to the position of the moon.
Yeah, that's right. So the only thing you need really is the moon and the ascendant. But they do the whole thing: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. Why do they do that? I don't know, but well, I guess it doesn't matter here. That's for
let me give further studies. Yeah, I think medical purposes. I've never seen a delineation on this or a judgment, but they seem to judge what we call today prenatal conditions, or certain illnesses through the chart of the conception.
Oh, and then they attribute 1 month to each planet.
Yeah, yes. And then the advancement of the chart of the conception until the age of birth. I've never seen it done, and I've never seen very clear instructions of how this would done. I would think that would appear in medical texts. Not sure, but probably that's where they're going at.
Right.
What kind of chart, I suspect.
Yeah, sometimes they use it. They attribute 1 month to each, 1 planet to each month. Probably they draw conclusions from that. We have to investigate that.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I've seen references to that practice in the early modern. Everything early modern.
Yes.
So 16th and 17th century, they mentioned that a lot, but I've never seen it done fully. So probably something earlier.
But all these calculations are like the preliminaries of the judgment. Well, they are the judgment already, but they are like setting the ground for the other part, the second part of the judgment, which is the judgment of the houses.
That's right. So then you have the interpretation, and this is what occupies the most of the judgment. Normally, like even 90% of it, and usually this is done by a review of the 12 houses. And then sometimes you have all sorts of sophistications, like first you review the ascendant, the midheaven, the descendant, the imum caelum, and then you start the 12 houses. There are all sorts of ways, but the 12 houses is the most common. The obvious exception is for those astrologers who follow Ptolemy, or at least Ptolemy in the Tetrabiblos, in the Quadripartitum. As you know, Ptolemy does not use the houses, and this is one of the mysteries of the history of astrology, because he is really the only one to do that or not to do that. And some astrologers follow Ptolemy and do not or only rarely mention the houses. So they only deal with the positions of the planets in the signs, the aspects, and maybe other things, but no houses.
Let me ask you something at this point. And you find that in earlier, later, or
Mixed.
at any time in your
I would say at any time, but well, I should perhaps have said that in the beginning. We have only 9 judgments of people born before 1400. So this is certainly not enough to make any statistics or to make any generalization. There is one of the 13th century, an amazing judgment made for someone born in 1255, and the astrologer, and that's absolutely exceptional for the whole of the Middle Ages. He decides to take as a main guide Firmicus Maternus. But in that case, you do deal with the houses, but there are so many other parameters that are ignored by the Arabic astrologers that the judgment is completely different from anything else we know. Okay, but that's another exception.
Just out of curiosity, where is this person from? Where is the figure? You don't know? Oh.
No, we don't. Unfortunately, we don't know anything. The name is not given. We don't know the client. We don't know the astrologer. It's in a manuscript in Paris.
Can we deduce the latitude from the distance from the ascendant to the MC? Maybe we can.
Yes, we probably can. This is something I do not do, probably wrongly, because I have problems with this. I am not sure that this is a good idea.
Okay. Yes.
Because I mean, if you apply the formula, you assume that it's an ideal world where the data found by the astrologer in his astronomical tables were correct.
Yeah.
But since this is often not the case, I don't know how we can apply those rules. So we have to be very careful. And I decided not, as a general rule, not to do it. And actually, when we do it as we realize, in the case of Henry Bate of Mechelen, which we studied on another occasion, 2 or 3 years ago, we have one of his horoscope according to John North that was drawn in Scandinavia. So clearly there is a problem here, because of course it's possible that he traveled there, but you don't see why.
No.
There is something bizarre, yeah. And especially as Henry Bate was a very good astrologer. He was astronomer and mathematician. So, you would rely on his data even more than on those of another astrologer. But I don't know. It has to be confirmed by other data, I believe. But in this case, we don't have. No. Maybe we have one. The astrologer was certainly active at the very end of the 13th century, and he certainly knew Henry Bate of Mechelen, perhaps even personally. But that's all. That's all. So he's certainly not someone from southern Italy, or But
interesting. Well, it is also a very good idea to keep away from things that may lead us in mistakes. So this, I think that's very wise, really. Mm-hmm. So we just.
My dream would be, well, I admire John North very much and his work in general. I mean, I really admire him. But I've been thinking several times. I would be curious if someone writes the same book, not using his book, whether they arrive at the same results. That's something that I would like to make sure first. But it's very difficult because few people can do that kind of calculations. I mean, go backwards and do for each of the house system, considering all existing house tables or planetary or astronomical tables in general, to reconstruct all systems is really difficult. But that would be very good to have. Yeah. As long as we don't have a backup. And I think the reader should be warned more than what he is in the book, that the problem of mistakes in the tabular material is so all over the place that we must wonder how reliable these formulas are still. Yeah.
Yes, mm-hmm. Yes, it is a question that we have to have. Not in the back of our minds, but in the front of our minds every time.
Because, people like Regiomontanus or even still Kepler, much later, Regiomontanus, he really believed that thanks to the printing press, most of the problems of the astronomers would be resolved, because the problem is that why is it never true? The table says that, and when you look at the sky, Mars is not where the table says it would be. So, I mean, this is a real problem. It means that this is important for everyone to know, that virtually all horoscopes drawn in history, at least before the 16th century, were wrong. Somehow wrong by for some planets up to 10 or 12 degrees. That's way too much. And all astronomers, they knew that very well. They knew that. They didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. But one of the problems was with all the mistakes made when you copy astronomical tables. You copy, and thanks to the printing press, these problems may well be resolved. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was an optimist.
And sometimes you have...
but then he died too early anyway.
And sometimes you have strange errors. Because if we have Mercury or Mars with a large error, that is to be expected, because these are positions, the tables will fail. But, for example, sometimes the moon is wrong.
Which is very strange. But it's very easy. Yeah.
They mixed up the days or the calculation somewhere, and the moon ends up 1 or 2 days off of their calculated date, which is strange.
Yeah.
And as you said, I've seen that occurring even in 17th century horoscopes, where you see mistakes. I've just transcribed one, which doesn't give the figure, so it is a complete mess, because at some point he contradicts himself in the narrative, and I have absolutely no idea how the horoscope would be. It's a mess. And this guy is a mathematician. He teaches mathematics. He's not someone who's just making calculations, an amateur. He's a really good mathematician. So what happened there? Yeah.
But even today, well, now we use a computer, so it's completely different. But just 20 or 30 years ago, we still did calculations by hand, and I did that too.
Yeah, we did.
And I remember that sometimes, and I don't know how that happened, what I did was completely wrong. It was like, I don't know, I took the line of days, like not the right birthday, but 2 days before, like, and I did the whole, and things like that. And then for the moon, it's 2 days, and that's almost one sign off. Of course, that can happen. In one of the examples I have, the moon is off by 3 signs or so, and the rest of the planets are basically correct. So how come the moon would be off by about 90 degrees? This is ridiculous.
Yes.
But it's just the way it is.
That would be a good theme for a large paper or something, which was errors in astrology.
Yeah.
To do a sort of survey.
What kind of errors?
What kind of errors do we find
and why?
Constantly? And,
trying to understand why.
Exactly, and trying to understand why they occur.
Because some of them are from the tables, and we can see because they are kind of coherent, and we understand. Some of them we don't. We just don't understand what happened. The person had some problem in that day. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. This is difficult, very difficult to do as well. We need an enormous amount of data, and when you have the data, we need a lot of time just to go through the data. We realized for the case of Henry Bate, we couldn't reconstruct the way he did his horoscope. So we have all the details of the calculations. Of course, we didn't have the exact tables he had in front of him, but we could never reconstruct what he did. There's still things we don't know, and we'll never know. We'll never know, really. But it's basically correct. His horoscope is correct. But we would like to know every single detail by the second, and that we do not know. We cannot know. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, resuming a bit the houses. So most of them, I would say, follow the houses, and then the ones who follow Ptolemy do not, or the few that follow Ptolemy to the letter, they don't follow the houses. You mentioned something very interesting, an example of an astrologer who followed the houses but used Ptolemy's words to fit into the houses, the narrative of the houses.
Yes, but that's not part of the 34 judgments.
Oh,
it is another text that I found in a manuscript where the author has worked out the Tetrabiblos books 3 and 4 on like individuals, and put all the material within the 12 houses. So it's a reorganization of the material by house, probably because he was not happy. He liked the material, but he was not happy to see that it was not organized by house. So he rearranged the material. Yeah.
That is interesting. Is it edited? This?
No. It's in the manuscript in Gloucester.
Something to do because you could do this. I'm always...
Yes, I could do this, but I'm telling you, I will not. No, I have no time. I felt actually when I finished this article, I thought now I should just continue with the 200 judgments and do something bigger. But I said no. Actually, anyone can do it now. I know the manuscripts. Someone can come to me. I will give the shelf marks, and that person will do the job. Because I'm not saying that what I did is should serve as a model. Maybe not. And there are certainly mistakes and things that are not regular. But it's I don't have time to do that.
It's a very good basis. I know you don't have time to do everything you want to, and we don't have time to do everything. But anyway, these judgments, and they follow the houses. And one of the things that I found interesting in the few that I saw, I haven't seen all of them, of course, but they talk about the 8th house very normally. It's very
at the end.
Yeah, just everyday life and everyday death. Just okay. And they accept this. And actually, in the first part of the horoscope, sometimes they include longevity. And that would be a normal part of the judgment. They don't avoid this topic. This is also interesting.
Right. Yeah, actually about this, I should have mentioned that in the introductory part, because this is related to the Alcohol. But I'd like to say something which I often read in the literature, that astrologers were typically wrong because they had to predict the date of death. And of course, they were wrong. They were almost always wrong. But actually, this is not what they do. I chose the terms I use. They don't say that person will die on a certain. They never say that. I have never seen an astrologer who says that. Maybe, I'm sure there are some, but I have never seen an example. They give the life expectancy.
Exactly.
So what they believe is, according to the calculation, this is the most likely. But they know that accidents in life of all sorts, including directions, bad revolution, or whatever, can intervene and change the path of things. And I think that's very important, because it's easy to say, oh, look, this astrologer was wrong. He was wrong. That shows that their art is really like completely no, but they don't do that. They don't do that.
I couldn't agree more. And what from the ones I read, and they are not all of them, of course. What they do, they use the Catalogus Codicum method for the expectancy of life. So you are expected to live at least, I don't know, 70 years, and then they use the directions for other purposes.
Yes.
For instance, if a difficult or potentially a fatal direction happens before the end of the expected end, it will be just like a dangerous situation. If it happens after the number of years given by the Codicum, it will be more dangerous. And that's what they do. They would say, be careful here and here and there. And the other thing that I find interesting, maybe not in all, maybe you disagree with me, but in the ones that I saw, they use this preventively, like be careful, because you have this life expectancy.
Absolutely, yes.
And you can improve this by by balancing your temperament, by praying, by several ways. So this is like a preventive measure for the person to expand, to use this information to expand their lives. They never say you're going to die in this. So they are not this silly.
Yes, absolutely, that's right. Yes.
This is also very interesting. Actually, I was when I was in Erlangen, I was writing an article about this, the way the concept of determinism interacts with astrological techniques. So how they deal with this, and what I saw is that the longevity, the techniques for calculating the length of life changed throughout Middle Ages, of course, and they become more flexible. So they have this expectancy. So it's different. So probably this is what they say, and they are kind of positive in a way. They say you are expected to live this, and you can expand your life. So it's kind of good news for the person, for the native. And at the same time, they deal with this very naturally. They are perfectly okay with this. They don't need to make this softer. It's like, okay, you're going to die someday. Try to make it as late as possible, and that's it. And then we have the third part, which is predictions. Also very interesting.
Yeah. So yes, that part may be missing sometimes. Sometimes it can be included in the second part. So, for example, when they do the 12 houses, they do the directions of each house within that house instead of directions at the end.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes they just give tables. That's very interesting because they only give tables of directions, which, if you know a little bit how it works, allows you to date the event. So you have just, I don't know, for example, Mars square Jupiter, that degree, and then you know when it is, if you know a little bit how the system works. And sometimes you have very developed tables, but without any explanation, without any interpretation. And that's probably because the client knows how to do. He knows how to interpret those tables, which is very interesting because some of the clients who were not astrologers, they probably knew enough to have an idea. Like they knew that a square was dangerous, Saturn, Mars dangerous, those dates, and probably they could work out a few things. So you have the directions. Sometimes they are very, explained in very much detail. And then you have often one or two revolutions, and often the revolutions around the time of the consultation, or the next year or the next 2 years. I haven't seen that for the Middle Ages, but I know that for the 16th century, you sometimes find 20 or 50 revolutions together with the judgment, and sometimes basically for every year of the life of the native. But that I haven't seen for the Middle Ages.
For those who are listening, so excuse me, just to say something. For those who are listening and they don't know what you mean by revolutions, revolutions is the return. It's
the solar return
of the sun to the exact location, zodiacal point, degree where it was when the person was born. Sorry,
yes.
Just about
which
this.
occurs around each anniversary of
around the anniversary.
Person, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, which is in itself problematic as a calculation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, when you brings another point. When they calculate the return, the revolutions for the future, they would use the birthplace. Even though the person could move to another place, they would have to use the birthplace, I would think. What do you think?
Well, actually, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but I don't believe they would use the birthplace. Because clearly, if the person I don't believe that any astrologer working in Paris, if he has someone who comes in Paris and lives in Paris, but he was born in southern Italy, I don't think they will calculate the revolution for Sicily, or they will do it for Paris. They will probably ask, where do you live? Where are you likely to be at the time of your birthday? And if they don't know, in the case they want to do 50 revolutions,
yeah,
that's different. Then they will take the date of birth, the place of birth, or the place where the person is likely to be.
I mean,
in the case of a king, it's not where. Sorry.
I mean, for the future revolutions, we have a late example of this in Lilly, and he has this example, a friend of him, a merchant, and he calculates, I think, 20 revolutions. And I mean, not for the present, for the future revolutions, he just uses the place of birth of the native because, what can he do?
Well, if you don't have, I don't know Lily very well, but his clients were mostly locals, right?
Yeah, this one is English, and I think he's lived in London, I suppose.
Yeah, but this is someone traveling. He's a merchant, and he mentions that he travels a lot. So
it could be somewhere else.
It could be somewhere.
So maybe the astrologer asked him to be back every year on his birthday to make sure that.
And then in a few weeks before the birthday, he would send a letter, come back, return.
Yes.
And is there, apart from directions and revolutions, do they use other techniques? Because I know the ones I studied.
Yeah, of course, they do also profections. I mean, directions and revolutions are the two big techniques. And that's the ones you normally find in a judgment. And then sometimes the profections.
Yes.
Well, I've seen in an extraordinary manuscript in Krakow, from Krakow, that's almost systematic. In all judgments, it's an amazing manuscript with 30 or 40 judgments on nativities. Just one manuscript. It's amazing. And it's clearly by not one, but two or several professors of astrology in Krakow, at the University of Krakow. So it's like they probably made a copy of their judgments available to the university somehow. And clearly profections were all over the place in Krakow in the beginning of the 16th century. And then you have the Fir d'Arié, or the various periods of the life of the native. I've seen in those Krakow judgments, I don't know, they make a big deal of the fact that life is divided into 3 parts. I don't know where that comes from, but this is part of...
the ascendant.
The
It's the triplicities of the ascendant. When you like they normally do
Or the
this,
luminary of the hour. Yeah.
or the triplicities
The
of the
sun or
luminary
the
of the
moon,
hour. They would first of all they calculate the more or less the expected life, because you cannot divide life in three parts unless you know the extent of life. So they calculate it roughly, and then they divide it in three parts. And the first part would be ruled by the first ruler of the triplicity of the ascendant, or of the sun or moon, and then the second by the second,
So
and the
probably-
third by the participant, something like that.
Probably that's what
Okay.
they.
Could be this, could be
Yeah.
this. I just jumped into this, but I don't know, it could be this.
Yeah,
It's not only
yeah.
what I see done. And they divide it, and then they use this, and this is the interesting part. They use these techniques together, as we do now. People who want to understand astrology, they have to understand it together. They don't just focus on one. They use the techniques together. They use the revolution. Well, they use the directions and the perfections for the general, and then the revolution for the period, specific periods of 1 year, and then they would just combine everything. And this is quite amazing because it's data, it's a lot of data to combine, and they can combine different levels.
Yeah, it's a lot, but look, that is probably too early to say. We need more data, and we need not only, because this is a survey, but we need is editions of text. I mean, we need to have the whole text in front of us, because it's not enough to have just the table of contents. And then we would need a lot before we really reach conclusions about how they really did that. But my first impression, this is only a very first impression, is that most of the astrologers are they are not at all original. They are like good students. They follow what they find in their theoretical text, but really by the book, and they follow exactly. So Al-Bohali said that, and I copy Al-Bohali's sentence word for word. In the case of the person who followed Firmicus Maternus, it's very simple. He takes everything Firmicus Maternus says about one given configuration of the chart, and he copies it exactly, except that Firmicus writes in the present tense, and this astrologer change into the future tense, everything. But it's exactly the same sentence. Actually, I shouldn't have said that, because I believe that besides this aspect, this is an amazing document that really deserves to be studied by. Actually, there are so many PhD theses in just that article, that survey. It would be possible to make or to do several PhD theses only with the material included here, and it is to be hoped that someone will. We need more editions of text, and we need to go beyond the 15th century, because the 16th century is it's also. Then a good thing in the 16th century is that in several instances we have several judgments by the same astrologer, so we can compare how they worked, maybe towards the beginning of their life to the end, which we don't have in this case. I mean, I think there is one case, 2 judgments by the same astrologer, and maybe 2 if we count Abraham ibn Ezra.
Ezra, yes. But we do need more people. Maybe someone who is listening to us. We do need people, specialized people, to study these texts, because only a few of them are edited in this collection.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you mentioned, we have discussed this a lot. They are not, and people complain, they are not original. Yeah, they are not supposed to be. I think they were supposed to master the art. And sometimes what we see is that they copy the masters, and they are very faithful to the masters. And then in the end they say, but from my experience, and then they add something. And this is how knowledge was supposed to go. Mm-hmm. They were not going against. Sometimes, and even in medieval times, they're not worried about contradictions between sources. They are not worried about that. They just copy. And then they add, in my experience, this and that. We have people who criticize, like Ezra, very funny, because he just criticizes. Mm-hmm. But mostly they are very faithful to the masters, and adding their experience. That's the way they did. innovation is something that we seek as people from the 21st century. I don't know if they were so much into that. It's a different.
No, maybe simply not. But even in the fact, because you mentioned that, they had to combine so many different elements to formulate any interpretation. But they don't seem to be doing that. They don't combine really. So, they do the directions and then the revolutions for the same period, but they don't put things in parallel. They don't seem to really, now I'll let you decide whether you trust the directions or the revolutions. Ciao. But we need more material to be sure, because it goes without saying that I haven't read all those judgments in detail. I certainly read them once each because I was chasing the names of the authorities, so I had to read every line. But many things totally escaped me, or simply, because I was too quick.
Yeah. Also, we are talking of them like in unity, as if they were all doing the same. They are different periods, different people, different education, different personalities.
In schools.
For instance, the one I studied, Simon Belle, the one that he writes in French, which you didn't include here, the one he writes in French, he does combine everything, and he's very masterful. He does not do that kind of, I just give you this and you take care. He takes care of combining everything. Maybe because he's writing in French, his own judgment, not copying from other people. So we do need to study this.
Yeah.
They are very different.
And is it a judgment to present to someone? It is something that you're writing for yourself.
Yes.
What's the differences in how you express certain terminologies, certain things? As you said, and I think I agree totally. People would know enough. Most people would know enough to follow their own directions or movements that the instructions the astrologer has laid out for them. I think in the same way that we nowadays read the analysis, the blood analysis, and of course we don't have the expertise, but we have an idea.
That's absolutely that's an excellent comparison.
Yes, my red globes are a bit low, and
you have an idea.
Because it was common knowledge, not only for astrologers, but at least the basics of astrology, they were everywhere.
I think this is something that is not emphasized enough yet in historiography, which is considering this that we're talking about. So this the production of materials, the art, and I mean plastic art, literature, culture, and every cultural object. Astrology and the basic knowledge of astrology was much more present and widespread than historiography has taken into account so far.
They just think it is something that people do, like judgment and horoscopes separated from the rest. But it's not.
It's still seen as something strange and weird that certain people will do or follow, and it's not the case at all in this kind of mindset. And I think until historiography realizes this, they're going to be missing a lot of clues into at least into cultural, into making a cultural assessment of things.
And they tend to think of astrology as something that is against science. Like these people in the Middle Ages, they were very clever, they were very good mathematicians, but then they had this problem with and they were silly, and they did this. And it was all part of the knowledge they had of the universe.
And talking a bit about academia, and it's sometimes and nowadays we have PDFs and we have searchable documents, so it's easier to do. And sometimes it's even a curious thing is books on medicine or history of mathematics or meteorology, or you go there and you find the word astrology, and either it's not there at all, or it's mentioned briefly in a passage that and astrology was there somewhere. And that's
if you write about medieval medicine, for instance, and you don't use the word astrology anywhere or any reference, it's kind of strange.
Even the referencing, I'm not going into.
Well, it's true, but maybe we should also keep in mind one thing, that we shouldn't exaggerate in the other direction, because it remains probably true that most medieval doctors never used astrology. This is probably true.
There was this tension between the ones that used and the ones that didn't. The ones that were more in I think the Roman school or something like that, they didn't. But the ones that did, and even here in the peninsula, you had a lot of them, and they criticized the others. And they use this saying that they attribute to Aristotle: blind is the doctor who doesn't know astrology. So it's kind of, they were using this against the others. But even so, if you write a book about medieval medicine or medieval meteorology, at least you could say it once, like just the word once, and sometimes we don't find it. And it's very easy to talk.
Even by stating that there is this material which I'm not going to study at this point because it's not the focus of the other research, and I can understand that, but not mentioning at all, it's strange. It's very, nowadays it's becoming more common to have the, but still.
But at the same time, it depends what you do. If you do what we would call today good history of science, of course you would mention that, and everyone does today. I mean, maybe not 30 years ago, but today I think everyone does, pretty much everyone. But if you do the genealogy of modern science, if you want to understand modern physics, you don't need to mention that at all. That would be just a waste of time. So you go straight from Ptolemy to Copernicus to start with, so there's no Middle Ages at all. And it also makes sense. It depends what you want to achieve, what you want to do.
That's why we mentioned medicine and meteorology, because some of them are okay. You can just jump. The others are kind of difficult to ignore.
True, but even so, and picking up the specific example we gave, physics and the development of physics as a modern concept, it is more related to astrology and has more input into the older astrological thinking that we assume. And so you can still see examples of remnants of astrological thinking coming into the creation of physics. It's still there in some aspects, the physics, meteorology, the movements of the air, it's still there. So it's not astrology anymore, but you can see where that comes from and why are they following certain lines of thinking and develop certain lines of thinking. It's still there. So it's more pervasive. The damn thing is more pervasive than people would like
plague. To. It's like the plague.
You can't get rid of it anyway.
Yeah,
but
it's like a
but
fungus.
Still, but I understand that you don't need to talk about that necessarily.
In certain instances, we really don't need to.
But in most media, I'm thinking more about medieval and early modern stuff. It's all over the place. So not mentioning it, sometimes it's strange. Of course, there are researchers who don't need to mention it because it doesn't make sense. But there are some which it creates a void, not even mentioning it once.
Yeah, I agree with that. But there is something actually I like to say, and I say it quite often around me, is that 30 years ago, if you wanted to deal with any aspect of the history of medieval or early modern science, no way it could have been with astrology or mentioning astrology. No way. That was really bad for you. I mean, you would have been sent to a psychiatric hospital. But now it's the exact opposite situation. If you deal with any aspect of medieval or early modern science without taking into account astrology, it doesn't mean to give in everything, but to take it into account, honestly, you like crazy. You're completely crazy. This is no longer possible, and I don't know any exception to this today. I think it's completely changed, or perhaps around people who are very old today. But no, but still, no. I don't think. I think it's completely changed. Completely.
It is, but still, sometimes when you are mentioning biographies, I'm not letting this go. Certain biographies, that element is missing.
Or very dimmed. Yeah.
missing. There are certain lines of historiography, and I'm not going to give exactly names here, but it's missing. They don't mention it, and probably they're coming from an older line of thinking, and I agree with you.
Okay, yeah.
But it's still not there, and even with the work and what we know today. And again, it just needs to be mentioned. Sometimes it's strange that it's not mentioned.
We have a very funny story about this. In Portugal, we had this king who restored the Second Dynasty, and he had his kind of general, the main general of his troops was called Nuno Álvares Pereira, was a man. And Nuno Álvares Pereira was the son, one of the kind of 20 sons of this, how do you call évêque in English? Abbey. Bishop, sorry, yes. I was kind of, we call it abad. Well, he was a clergyman.
He was a clergyman.
Not supposed to have children, but he had a lot. So this Nuno was one of the children of this clergyman, one of the many, with several women. And every time this clergyman was very much into astrology. Every time he had one of these illegal children, he asked for the horoscope. And the horoscope of this Nuno was apparently, we don't have it, but apparently was about being a very respected warrior and blah, blah, you know, this kind of legend. And he married, he had a child, and then he decided to go to a convent. This happens a lot in medieval ages. They had this active period, and then they go to a kind of a monastery or something. And he did this voluntarily. That's what he wanted. So he became kind of a saint in Portugal. So someone mentioned that his father was into astrology, and the astrology was
and this is mentioned in the chronicles, so it is not something which is kept a secret. It's something that is mentioned in the chronicles very straightforwardly, and that by birth he would have these amazing characteristics of a hero, etc. Of course, this is more narrative, embellishment of narrative than astrology, exactly, but it's still there, and it is important to notice it.
Yeah, especially because they don't give the horoscope. They just say the horoscope shows that you will be a warrior. So
and even and what Elena, I think, is even being in the chronicles, straightforward in the chronicles,
they ignore it.
They ignore it completely. And
there was this old...
And if you mention it, people, it can't be.
Because he was it cannot be because he was a saint.
Yeah,
because
they wouldn't do that. And look, read the chronicles, and you have that. Even in the, I wouldn't say these are academics, but people who are
into history,
educated in history.
But even in academia, I had someone, a scholar, a very good one, and the first time I said, look, this king, we have a king, another king, that wrote about astrology, and the person said maybe he was joking. So they cannot accept.
It's true. There is what is his name again? There is a very beautiful page written about this by Gérard Simon in his book Kepler, Astrologue, Astronome, or Astronome, Astrologue, the book published in 1979. It's first of all, it's an amazing book. I think it's still today an excellent book of history of science. And he explains that in one page, I mean, what people have thought about Kepler, because Kepler, like the great Kepler, could not have possibly done horoscopes and astrology and blah, blah, blah. And he explained that very well. And the whole book is about Kepler's astrology. And then you can see that Kepler was busy with astrology all his life until the very end. That's a beautiful, beautiful example. Or Copernicus is even better. Still 10 years ago, you couldn't possibly imply that perhaps Copernicus dealt with astrology. Now it's totally changed. No one would dare to say that. But now we found the proof. Actually, I should write an article about this too.
Please do.
I want to do a podcast
on that.
That's right. We should, no, this is the idea. This is very exciting. It's so exciting.
Yeah. No, it is interesting because even if these mathematicians, astronomers are not engaging astrology in a day-to-day basis, or it's not something that they use regularly, which can occur because it's not their main interest in mathematics or astronomy, they would know it. And probably they would have calculated something at some point. They would have done some kind of judgment, even if something occasional, because it was part of that culture. So it would be very strange at some point to have a mathematician that I'm not going near that, and I'm not going ever to discuss that, because it's almost impossible. Things are so connected, even with natural philosophy, that I don't know if they even have mental categories in which they would completely separate that. That I think would be a very extreme and rare condition. Probably
maybe not different mental categories, but as soon as it involves lots of calculations, and you need to learn how to do that, many people would have said, no, this is perfectly fine, but it's not for me. I leave that to specialists. It's like your blood test. You can check like the sugar level and a few things, but in the end, the doctor will do the job, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not probably the same.
Yeah, but that is a different thing. That is like let the specialists do the complicated stuff.
Yeah.
But the more basic stuff was part of a natural part of culture.
Let me give you an example from my own research. For example, I've said this here a lot. I'm researching Jesuits and the involvement that Jesuits have with astrology, which is almost zero of historiography on that. So what I observed is that the great Jesuit mathematicians, astronomers, even those which criticize astrology, they know what they're talking about. So you can see clearly from their writings, from their argumentation, that they have studied it. Probably they have practiced it. So they know exactly, even the ones that are criticized, they know exactly where to hit to create a critique, a proper critique. So it is part of their knowledge and culture, even if they don't practice it. And clearly there are some who practice it and they know it, even if we don't have the proof, the documental proof. You can see by the argumentation that this is from a practitioner's point of view. And there are others who, even if they're not practicing it and they are completely against it, they, even in the scientific stance, they know what they're talking about. So at some point, they debated that, they did that, they experiment, they learned it. So it's part of their culture, even if they're not.
It's not even about liking or disliking.
So if we say, probably Copernicus engaged with astrology at some point in his life, almost certainly it would be strange if he didn't. It would be very, very strange, and that would be very interesting.
Well, I think David has at least 2 or 3 papers to write at this point.
Totally.
And we have 2 or 3 podcasts to do. Before we go, David, I would like to just for you to say a few words about the book that you edited recently, the one with 15 contributions about Ptolemy.
Yes.
Just now on a different topic.
Yeah, well, we have a few items about astrology, but it's really the sort of state of art of the Ptolemaic studies in the Middle Ages in both Arabic and Latin, although we also have a section for Greek and Syriac at the beginning.
Yes.
And so it's Ptolemy through the ages, but only astronomy and astrology. And of course, there is a lot of mathematics too. But I mean, it's no geography or harmonics. It's really astronomy and astrology. Yeah, and that was a conference that we organized, the Ptolemaious Arabus et Latinus project, that we organized at the Warburg Institute in 2015, and the book just appeared now because it was delayed and blah 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 as always. Well, actually, look, that's one of the 2 books I have with me. I have only 2 books. Yeah, well, of course, people do not know that I am in Australia, but I am stuck in Australia due to COVID.
Yeah.
And of course, my library is in Munich. So this is, I don't know whether you can see
I can
it.
see, yes, yes.
You can, yes.
And we will publish it
And it's
below.
available for it as a downloadable PDF if people.
Yes, if you go to the website of the project, maybe you can give the link, because you can do that, right? If you give the link, you can go to either publications or to news or somewhere, you will find it, and you can download the whole book. It's for free. Everyone can have the whole book for free except the cover. The cover is Taurus. It's for
Okay. So I hope to see you in person sometime later this year. Let's see. Let's.
so.
You don't think so? You think you will stay in Australia for the whole?
Another year, yeah.
Oh, at least for next year. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, but we'll see, yeah.
As long as we are all okay, that is the point also.
That's the most important.
And meanwhile, we will be talking on Skype, on Zoom.
On Zoom.
Yes. Well, thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you. That was a pleasure.
It was also a pleasure for us.
Indeed.
Lovely. And we will talk soon, I hope.
Yes, probably.
Meanwhile, you have 2 papers to write.
I know. Okay, I better go and work.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.